Some say Southern Cross Station is Melbourne's Grand Western Gateway. The multi-award winning station has an enormous undulating roof, vast concourses, and millions of annual metropolitan and regional passengers. But why is it still one of Victoria's least liked stations? In today's video, I'm looking at the history of the former Spencer Street station, the big 2006 redevelopment, including the controversial public-private partnership awarded for its operation and management, its design and construction, and where, in my view, Southern Cross Station wins and loses. Southern Cross Station is Melbourne's busiest transport hub outside Flinders Street Station. It links suburban metro trains with V-Line regional trains, interstate trains, airport coaches, local buses, and trams. The station sits at the western edge of the CBD. The station building and adjoining retail essentially spans two city blocks. The station also acts as a bridge between Docklands to the west and the city to the east, but it hasn't always been like this. The first Spencer Street station opened in January 1859, only 5 years after Flinders Street Station. At this time, Melbourne's train networks were highly fragmented, with lines operated by different private companies. The new Spencer Street station marked the dawn of the government-run Victorian Railways, with the Williamstown and Sunbury government lines soon operating from Spencer Street. The Victorian Railways head office was located just down the road at 67 Spencer Street, now known and operated as the Grand Hotel. Before this head office was built, you might be surprised to learn there were actually plans for grand station buildings at Spencer Street Station from 1883 and 1892, though they never eventuated. The station had one main platform that ran parallel to Spencer Street with a dock platform at the north end, meaning it was a dead end that trains had to reverse out of. The station allowed large-scale transport of produce from regional Victoria, which could then be shipped internationally. Tanning, curing, and wool scouring factories all soon developed around the station, which shaped the character of the area. The station did see some upgrades over the years. In 1910, a historic water tower clock was added to the station. The clock was built in 1882 for the original Flinders Street station before being relocated a number of times, including for a period at Science Works. I actually couldn't find out why it was called the water tower clock though. If you know more, please let me know. Other upgrades included getting more tracks, becoming linked to Flinders Street station through the Flinders Street Viaduct in 1891, getting a subway network in 1918, and electrification in 1919. But the fragmented nature of these upgrades meant the station ended up as a series of iron sheds. By 1960, the original station was in dire need of an upgrade. Sparked by the new interstate train line to Sydney, the government embarked on a station modernisation project which involved consolidating the sheds, extending the subways, and building a modernist brown brick station building. The new station opened in 1963. This building proved to be a suitably grand facility for people travelling on flagship interstate trains like the Spirit of Progress, the Overland, and the new Southern Aurora. The concourse was an open area with a mezzanine-level cafeteria. In 1978, a huge mural titled Cavalcade of Transport was installed above the main concourse. The artwork shows a century of transport history from 1835 onwards. It was painted by artist Harold Friedman, who spent 6 months researching transport history before work even began. Alongside 3 assistant painters, the mural took over 5 years to complete. The mural was one of the most defining features of the old Spencer Street station and measured 38 metres long and 7 metres high. While it's not so obvious now, you can still see this mural above TK Maxx in the Spencer Street Outlet Centre. After the station redevelopment, the artwork spent several years in storage before being relocated to the centre in 2007 and then moved again to its current position in 2014. It's not a very dignified location for the artwork, but I understand why it's in this somewhat protected spot. In 1999, then Premier Steve Bracks launched the $3.5 billion Linking Victoria program, a major package of upgrades to transport infrastructure across the state. One of the flagship upgrades was the redevelopment of the 30-year-old Spencer Street station, which was struggling to meet rising patronage. Also on the list were upgrades to the Calder, Geelong and Eastern freeways, the return of regional rail services that were cut under previous governments, and, cough cough, an airport rail link. Rather than build and run the station themselves, the Victorian government chose to enter into a public-private partnership, or PPP, through the Southern Cross Station Authority. PPPs are long-term contracts between the government and private sector to deliver public infrastructure, helping to reduce upfront costs to taxpayers and, in theory, utilising the experience of the private sector. It seems like arrangements like this are still pretty popular. This decision seems to make political and financial sense for the time. The state was already spending heavily on infrastructure through the Linking Victoria program, so finding ways to limit public spending could have reduced criticism. In 2001, the government held a competitive expression of interest and tender process, where bidders were asked to provide designs for the new station and the best value for money. In October 2001, 3 shortlisted bidders were announced. The first consortium was Civic Nexus, and they included designs by English firm Grimshaw in their first Australian project, and locals Jackson Architecture. I'll come back to this in a moment. The second consortium included these out there designs by Ashton Raggett McDougall. And the third consortium included these designs by Denton Corker Marshall, which also feature a grand roof over the station. In July 2002, the Civic Nexus Consortium was awarded the contract. Civic Nexus is owned by IFM investors, so it's very possible your super fund owns Southern Cross Station. Civic Nexus would finance the project, oversee construction, and operate and maintain the station for 30 years. The government would pay them an annual fee of $34 million plus inflation, and at the end of the 30 years, ownership would revert back to the government. Unlike the 1960s station, the winning design by Grimshaw and Jackson Architecture showed an open and light-filled station. Its masterpiece was an undulating steel roof. The roof was both grand in scale and, apparently, passive technology. The roof was said to be able to trap diesel vapours from regional and interstate trains in its upturned wells, with louvers allowing vapours to escape outside. To add to the openness, the redeveloped station would feature full glass frontage to Spencer and Collins Streets and elevated concourses adjoining the Burke Street Bridge and Collins Street extension. I have to pause here for a moment. While researching this video, I came across a 2017 video from the architects behind Southern Cross Station. It was fascinating because complaints about the station had been around since at least 2009, yet this video still spoke confidently about the design of the roof. The video explained that southwesterly winds would help with natural ventilation, circumventing the need for rooftop ventilation units. It was especially important that the roof looked visually interesting from above, as there would be a lot of high-rises looking down on it. At one point, someone in the video said, quote, "It gets 40 degrees plus a lot of the time," which to me shows there was a clear misunderstanding about Melbourne's weather. It already seems like this video was negatively received, and I don't want to pile on. I just wanted to highlight it now because it's pretty clear that there was a disconnect between how the architects thought the station might function and the reality people experience today. In 2002, Civic Nexus brought latent contractors on board to build the station, and construction started that year. Construction was incredibly complex. The wavy steel structure was massive and had peaks at different heights. The Age reported that around 100 builders were trained in abseiling to install the more than 7,000 different roof pieces while suspended in the air. Another complexity was the use of ethylene tetrafluoroethylene, or ETFE, one of its first major uses in an Australian building. ETFE is a durable plastic and pillars of it stretch across sections of the roof, allowing natural light onto the platforms below. Though, when ETFE fails, it can be pretty costly, like during this hailstorm in 2010 when repairs were projected to be $5 million. One other drawback is that if it were to catch fire, it would release hydrofluoric acid, which is extremely corrosive and toxic. Because most tracks were not being completely replaced, my understanding is that they were only moved and reordered, construction was meant to occur without shutting the existing station. Platforms and other structures were intended to be demolished and rebuilt in stages around the existing schedule of trains. This resulted in significant conflicts between Leighton contractors and train operator Connex, who wanted to keep the trains running as much as possible. Ultimately, though, there were widespread disruptions. Some trains were diverted away from the station on a regular basis, and many others bypassed the station for weeks at a time. By late 2004, Leighton contractors publicly announced that they were forecasting losses of around $122 million on the project, and started seeking compensation. In 2006, before construction was finalised, the Spencer Street Station Authority handed over the entire project to Civic Nexus and reached a settlement with the parties totaling more than $32 million to settle the conflict. By 2007, legal proceedings associated with the project resulted in an additional $135 million in costs for the government. Perhaps people's biggest gripe was that, in 2005, the pedestrian subway under the station was permanently closed. You can still see the entrances to the subway on the platforms, but now it apparently houses critical infrastructure that would be too expensive to move. There have been attempts to investigate reopening the subway to no avail. The government's hopes that the station would be opened by April 2005, so that all major lines could run through the station for the 2006 Commonwealth Games, were dashed. The completion date blew out several times, with the new station opening to the public in stages in late 2005 and early 2006. As you could imagine, costs blew out too. The number can get confusing and differs across sources, but from what I could find, the station component of the development was forecast to cost around $300 million and grew to at least $350 million. The overall development, including the retail and commercial parts, ended up costing a whopping $700 million, around $1.1 billion in today's money. The delays and cost overruns meant that some planned features never made it into the final station. We can see these when looking at 2002 renders. We never got the floor tiles. We got a bit of bluestone but mostly asphalt, and we never got the feature lighting in the structural columns. The following was never constructed: a roof over the Burke Street Bridge, a pedestrian bridge linking the stadium with Lonsdale Street, this was apparently meant to go here, and a bridge linking the elevated Collins Street concourse to the Burke Street Bridge above platforms 5 and 6. This, and some other upgrades, were pitched again by Civic Nexus in 2016, but the government decided not to go ahead. Also scrapped were plans for a 25-storey apartment tower above the coach terminal, a 36-storey office tower over the Collins Street concourse, and a hotel where the Coles now is. It was reported as early as 2005 that due to cost overruns, the wave roof above platforms 13 to 16 would not be built. Instead, it would be a concrete deck for a new low-rise linear building. In the end, the initial construction did see the wave roof built to platform 14, but platforms 15 and 16 weren't built. These were built between 2009 and 2013, with two low-rise towers built above them, which explains why these platforms have a different roof to the rest of the station. In about 2002, the government commissioned research to see whether the public would accept the station having its name changed to Southern Cross Station, a name spearheaded by former Labor Minister for Transport Infrastructure Peter Batchelor, after being inspired by paintings of the Milky Way and Southern Cross. This name did end up coming into effect, and in December 2005, the first trains began using the new name. Though this name was not supported by bodies such as the National Trust and the Public Transport Users Association, or indeed much of the general public, even 20 years later. The new station made a huge difference to Melbourne's rail network, relieving congestion at Flinders Street and symbolising record investment in public infrastructure. There was much fanfare after it opened, and Southern Cross Station received numerous Australian and international awards, including the prestigious Royal Institute of British Architects Lubetkin Prize for Most Outstanding Building Outside the European Union. I have to say, I actually really like the aesthetic of the station. I know it sounds like such a contradiction because I have a lot to say about its shortcomings, but it's true, I like it. I've seen the roof be described as undulating, billowing, dune-like, a sea of churning metal waves. I don't think there are many other stations that can be described in such a way. I like pausing on the elevators and looking out at the exposed steel across the entire roof, and I appreciate the origami-like effect of the cladding on the underside of the roof. Even though they've lost a bit of their charm now, one of my favourite features of the station is the freestanding yellow office blocks. Before the underneath was filled in with commercial space, you could really appreciate that they were standing on legs, kind of like an old TV set. Back in the day, the station was also lit beautifully. The lighting over the Collins Street entrance resembled a night sky, and the ETFE panels were once lit in purple along their entire length, contrasting nicely with the gold shade of the origami cladding. The deck above platforms 15 and 16 also used to be lit nicely. Lastly, there are some details in the building that you might miss if you don't stop to look. The glass wall transitions into vents at street level, but they don't touch the ground. Similarly, the glass panels just lightly touch the structural support columns, which is a really interesting touch. This here is actually a gate that can close, and it's the same design as the rest of the station, as is this gate on Collins Street. I don't know what these are called, but they're really cool. And they're much more interesting than poles that would just go straight into the ground. Despite its ambition, Southern Cross Station has attracted a lot of criticism. One recurring criticism is air quality. While the roof was designed to draw out fumes naturally, it simply isn't working as intended. As soon as you enter into the station, the smell of diesel is really hard to ignore. According to the ABC, pollution levels have remained within enforceable workplace standards, but have exceeded other Australian and international guidelines. Experts have described the air as some of the least clean air in Melbourne, and station workers have publicly raised concerns about long-term health impact. In recent years, the state government even announced plans to install a mechanical extraction system to help pull fumes out, but this didn't seem to progress. For anyone wondering why the diesel trains can't just be shut off, apparently it takes a while to start these diesel engines, between 10 and 30 minutes. It just wouldn't be feasible to always turn them off. The engine needs to be on for other reasons too, like the pneumatic brakes and on-train lighting and air conditioning. Many people find Southern Cross uncomfortable to be in for other reasons too. Unfortunately, the station's open design means it can get awfully cold in winter, and it gets really loud in there. The ETFE panels are great in theory, but on a cloudy day, the station gets really dark. Wayfinding is also a bit of an issue. Some paths from Spencer and Burke Streets literally require you to take an escalator up and then back down again to get to your platform. It would be helpful if the subway was still open, but it doesn't seem like that's happening anytime soon. The escalators had a reputation for always breaking down, but thankfully these are being upgraded, as are the passenger information displays, though I wish they'd just add some more. It doesn't help either that V-Line services depart from both the lowest numbered platforms and the highest numbered platforms, and bins have only just recently returned to platforms after a very long hiatus. The last criticism I wanted to mention is how commercialized the station has become. I spent a bit of time looking at these photos from when the station first opened. They show how much cleaner and open the space once was, and help you appreciate the grand architecture of the station. The commercialization is, of course, all by design. The PPP allows Civic Nexus to advertise and lease commercial space so that, in addition to the regular payments they get from the government, they can make money in other ways. Unfortunately, the result is advertising and commercial space in almost every available corner. Ads are literally hanging from the roof and under your feet while you go up the stairs. Even the historic water tower clock is surrounded by advertising. I wouldn't blame you if you never even noticed it here. The result for many people is a station that feels cluttered, cold, and overly commercial. Somewhere that people want to move through quickly, which is entirely the opposite of what the government and architects had hoped for when embarking on this project. There's something about these types of major public infrastructure projects that always get me. I'm grateful that we live in a society where the government invests in public infrastructure and tries to generate civic pride, something I don't think you can blame them for. But at the same time, these projects sometimes go so wrong and the result is far from the original intention. I do like how new technologies sometimes get tested on these big projects, but action needs to be taken once it's clear things aren't working. I don't think anyone can deny that Southern Cross Station is an amazing feat of engineering, but it's proven to be a cautious tale about the dangers of public-private partnerships and the constant chase after city-shaping projects. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't watched one of my videos before, I'm Ken and I make videos about history, infrastructure, architecture and the environment. If you'd like to support the channel and help me keep making videos like this, there's a link below where you can buy me a coffee. See you in the next one.